So this is what we have at the moment. We've got these unfolding. So next I'm going to grow on our hairs along our branch as it unfolds. Now in our last video I actually did this by carving the lines and then putting down a resample in fixed point mode, just so that we would keep the same number of points throughout, which would keep our motion blur from getting messed up. Here we're going to use a slightly different function just to demonstrate. This is actually a really useful function called primuv. So we're going to put down a point wrangle. Put this underneath. We're just going to set our position of our points to be equal to primuv. So primuv essentially will give you the attribute on a piece of geometry based on its parametric UVW position. So essentially it's going to look up an attribute based on its UVs and return that. Now our curves, we've already got an attribute called curve U. Let's go and zoom in here. So let's take, for example, this spline here on the end. So we've got our curve U value of 0 at the base and a curve U value of 1 at the end, and every point in the middle has a value in between that, so halfway down it's about 0.5. So let's use that to look up our point position. So if I type 0, we're going to operate on our 0th geometry stream, so our first input, which is just all our lines here. We're going to look up our attribute called position, which is P, and we need to put those in quotes. We're going to look this up on our prim number, so we're just going to use our current prim num, and essentially this means it will just work on all the lines at the same time. And we're going to put down float attribute curve U. Close that out and you'll see that nothing has changed at all. And of course the reason for that is we're basically asking for the position at all of our points along the curve based on the curve U, and it's just returning that same position. So even though this seems like there was no point to this, the interesting thing is now if we were to say take this curve U and we can multiply this by another value. So let's just multiply by channel float. Let's create a slider here called grow. Create that parameter. And now if we slide this parameter, you can see we're now growing on our points. It's almost like we're not really growing them. It's more like if I just come to our template here, you can see it's just pushing the points along our original curve. So it's a useful function, this. You can almost think of it like if we take this top point at the top here, its curve U position is 1, so it's going to request the position right there. But if we were to set this multiplier to 0.5, for example, it's now going to ask for the position halfway down because we've multiplied this by 0.5. So essentially it just slides our points all the way down to the base. So it's a super cool way that I use quite a bit for just growing things on by doing this. And the nice thing is this doesn't have to be just a slider. You know, we could have a fall off or an attribute that runs through this, and so you could grow on your hairs like with a fall off or something like that. So it's just another way of doing the sort of same thing, but it's quite an interesting little setup. So for now we're just going to use this just to grow this on. I'm going to go back to frame 1. I'm going to set this to be, let's come down here, somewhere around 0.4, I think, 0.3, 0.03. Keyframe that. I'm going to come to the end. I'm going to set that to be 1, so we've grown them on there. And let's just see. I'm going to change that a bit. I think I'm going to move it forward a little bit more. I think maybe bring this back, stretch this out so there's a nice long fall off here. So it's going to quickly grow up and then sort of slowly ease out there. So now if we press play, you can see it does this. Cool. Okay, so let's come down to the bottom here, just above our transform. see what we've got. Not bad. Another thing I want to do though is just have this scale from 0. So I'm going to come down and just, before we transform this onto our z-axis for our copy to points, let's put down one more transform here. And I'm just going to come to maybe frame 55, keyframe that, bring this down to 0, keyframe that. Now we've got this growing up from 0. As always, I'm probably going to just tweak this curve just to kind of smooth out a bit more. Maybe just drag this out a bit, pull this back. So we've got a similar sort of slope, but just eases out further. And there is our result there. I think I might also just go back to our original branch noise and just increase the speed of that a little bit more. Let's go up here. Let's come to the noise we added after our initial branches, and I'm going to maybe just half that to divided by 10. It's got a little bit more movement now. Let's come down to the bottom. I think that will look nice for the scale we're working at. Could potentially add a few more points in here to our hairs. If we were to come up to where we are creating our hairs, we could increase the number of points on our resample to maybe 8, 9. And we'll just do it to 8 for now. Of course, this isn't going to be in super close-up detail, but might just help with the jagginess a bit. So I think we will go with this for now. That's good. Okay, so let's quickly just copy this. I'm going to go back to our main setup just to have a look at this in our main view. I'm going to come down to our render camera. Let's take our original object merge that merged in our plant A. Let's just call this one plant A so it's clear. Just duplicate this across and call this plant C. We can just paste our path in there, Control V. I'm just going to swap this over and let's have a look, see how this is looking. You can see because we've got quite a bit more geometry now. Houdini's kicked in and activated our rounding box here. So it's kind of culling our geometry down to simple boxes. You can turn this off if you like. Just come and press D, come to optimize and either increase your limit here or just turn off distance based packed geometry culling. And then when you move your viewport, it will update. Although it is a little bit slower, so it's probably a good idea to keep this on and we won't crash Houdini. Okay, so let's come back to our render camera. Let's view this. That's the animation so far. Let's come to the end. Just have a look through our render view just for the sake of it. See how this is looking. It's going to turn off our plant C here because that doesn't need to be seen. And there we go. I think we can make these a little bit bigger, and also once we've got all our plants in, we'll be varying these. But I think this is looking nice for the moment. So with that, let's bank this and move on to our next plant.